All right, we are recording again, and going to there's the French Baroque. Okay, so the Baroque in France. There's Louis XIV. So Louis XIV was a long-serving monarch of France, and French. So French Baroque really got its start when Catherine de' Medici married Henry II of France, who was Louis XIV's grandfather, I believe. And so you read the Abrams Guide, you will read a little bit about what that process was. That because she's Italian, she's of the Medici family. She brought the Italian Baroque from Italy to France, and so that really got not just the style, but also the people who could make it coming up to France. And the one of the things that the French crown, like I guess the French monarchy did, that was associated with Baroque and the need for this, like basically the level of craft that the Italians achieved was new to the French, and so they had to import lots of craftsmen to do the work, to build art, like to create the architecture, but also the furnishings. So Henry IV, so I guess, well, who preceded Louis XIV, he was one of the first to establish workshops. One of the first that he created was the Louvre, which is now a great, great museum. But originally, that was a place that housed workshops to support artists and tradespeople for like furniture building, carpets, tapestries. Last week, I showed you a video of the tapestry weaving at a place called Gobelin, and that was established in this period, in the Baroque period, and they've been making tapestries ever since. There was a time when that particular workshop produced more different types of furnishings, but they kind of got it down to just tapestries was what they started to specialize in. So what you have is the royal patronage stimulates manufacturing, and they also supported they demanded a very high level of craft, and so the work that was done just got better and better and better. Now here, let's see my notes here. So the French crown, or the French monarchy, establishes workshops, and that stimulates really a lot of innovation and the development of really high quality stuff in terms of techniques and just really just like beautiful workmanship. Printing is still part of this, where you can print clear and uniform instructional texts that allowed the Italians to communicate information to the French through printed texts. So Louis XIV is sometimes, he was known as the Sun King. He was considered a divine monarch. Initially, he was too young when his father died. He was in a regency period where he was too young, someone else had to rule for him, and that was a guy named Cardinal Mazarin, who really kind of kept the monarchy going. when Louis XIV became monarch, one of the things that he did is he moved the seat of the French court. He moved the French court out to Versailles, which originally was a hunting lodge that I think his grandfather had built. But he developed it into this vast estate. When he was there was a rebellion when Louis XIV was still not. He was a teenage prince, and he and his family were running for their lives, and they were living in Paris. And he thought, it's crazy that we should be here living amongst all these people who hate us. We should get far away from them. So he built Versailles. And it is quite big. This is just a section of it. And so, Louis XIV consolidated power to where he became, really, France came into its own. He was the most powerful monarch in Europe. And there was a lot of money. There was a lot of success fighting wars with the nations around them. And so France became very wealthy and was able to create places like Versailles and support all these workshops that were producing furniture, tapestries, decorative objects, all for the French monarchy and other wealthy elite. Okay, so here are the Hall of Mirrors in Versailles. So the technology of lighting was still fire. It was.
Mr. O'Connor, we were just seeing you, not You're showing. Are you showing the Hall of Mirrors right now?
Yes.
Also, I don't see it.
You don't see it? All right. Maybe there's something with my.
I don't know if else can see
your microphone. Okay, I thought I had. I thought I was sharing my screen.
Okay, I think now it's going.
Now I'm sharing my screen. All right, so here is. Let's go back. So there's Versailles. So this is a plan of Versailles, which is really kind of hard to. It's kind of hard to get the scale of it. It's big. It's very big, and so here this Hall of Mirrors. So you see large windows on the left. A lot of similar to Italian Baroque. It is neoclassical. This is really one of the first times. I mean, Baroque, we can call it neoclassical. It's using a lot of the same elements of Roman and Greek architecture, really not any Egyptian. This is like Greek and Roman. So you see these big, arches with the mirrored panels just like sitting opposite the windows. The mirrors were used to make the interiors look even bigger, but it was also a way of reflecting light back into the room. So when you have candle power is your only artificial illumination, it's only going to get so bright. These chandeliers that have lots and lots of candles, the more candles, the more illumination. But there were always limits to that. So mirrors were a way of amplifying light and making and increasing the apparent scale of a place. So here's an image of a masquerade. I think it would probably be darker up at the ceiling, but you can see where there are chandeliers and candelabra everywhere. Okay, here is a Louis the 14th on the right here. The large wigs were the fashion for the men. Big, like blocky heeled shoes. And you can see all the way on the right here, this great big throne chair, which is of course for the monarch. And so in this, you can see here in the French court, everyone is standing. In a little bit, I'll show you some slides of some little tiny, these like very low stools that if you were ever given privilege to sit in his presence, normally you would have to stand. Your attendant would bring out this little low stool of a tabaret or a pliant, and you would be permitted to sit. But it's very low, so if you sat down with him, you would be sitting like really, really low. So he would be standing really towering over you. So that whole idea of hierarchy of scale, you can see his throne is set up on a dais on stairs. So literal height is a way of reinforcing authority and status and social rank. Here, how much money do they have? Solid silver vase holding an orange tree. That's an expensive object. Made to look like a Roman urn. But at some point, there were times like, fortunes rise and fall. There was a period where the French were doing poorly in some of their wars later into Louis XIV's reign, and they had to melt down a lot of the silver furniture just for money, so they could buy weapons, food. They didn't need all the luxuries if they're fighting a war. All right, so here in Versailles, the Salon of War. So Louis XIV was presented as this warrior. He wasn't. And so this is like a recorded history of Louis XIV. The stucco roundel over the fireplace. So this is this stucco. So the stucco is really something that goes back to the ancient Romans. So the style, the choice of this stucco relief is intentional. And here, Salon of Peace. Of course, he's the war bringer and the peace giver. There was a lot of this sort of like myth around him that was presented as truth of who he was and his great accomplishments. So again, lots of Roman stuff. The urn and the amorini or little cherubs hanging out there. You'll see this also this frontal face, sometimes with a rays around it. That is the god Apollo. Let's go back to the first slide here. Which I'm sorry we missed this the first time since I wasn't actually sharing the screen. There he is, dressed up as Apollo. In his Apollo costume with the ostrich feathers, and you can see this sun logo right here. A little sun. He's got this little it's all he's all radiant like the sun. Pretty nifty, huh? Don't you wish you had one of those? I know I do. So, okay, there we go. So here, let's go back to this one. Okay, so here is the king's bedchamber. Lots of gold. And so, similar to this, this the bed with basically the bed is an enclosure with this really just beautifully woven fabric. Lots of gold, as the video showed, mentioned last time from Gobelin. They would use wool, silk, and sometimes gold or silver thread. Gold and silver thread was extremely expensive, and so only the wealthiest could afford it. And who was the wealthiest of all? Louis. So you see a lot of gold. All right, now here is a tapestry, which is kind of like this is kind of like a meta thing. They made a tapestry of Louis XIV coming to visit Gobelin, and so there was a tapestry made to commemorate the occurrence. So if you remember from watching that video about tapestries, you can appreciate how the amount of work that went into making something like this. All right, so here's a cabinet by a guy named André Charles Boulle. This name is associated with a type of ornament. And so here's a commode, which is a low cabinet. This is an armoire. Now this stuff, so all of this, what looks gold, is not gold. It is it's bronze or brass. It's made to look gold, but it's all cut. So this is like basically this is a veneer. So it's oak veneer with exotic woods, tortoiseshell, and brass. Now, actually, it's these mounts here that are called ormolu, where they are bronze mounts, and to make them look gold, they're fired in a kiln with vaporized mercury, which is a very poisonous substance. And the technique of ormolu was one of the first to be outlawed as unsafe, because it made people really sick who did it. But so you can see this is all this metal. So what looks gold here, this is like this bronze, is this is brass, is cut. And then in here is a tortoiseshell veneer in there. And then there's like the wood out here. They're not messing around. And here is another writing desk. This technique of using this like cut metal and tortoiseshell veneer that this guy Boulle was really known for, his name became synonymous with the process. So even if he didn't do it, people called it Boulle work. Yep, go back. Sorry again. All right. So this is let's just say, it's a high level of craft involved with creating this kind of a veneer on a surface. A carpet from Savonnerie. Damn you! Oh, there we go. Savonnerie was another workshop, and Savonnerie refers to it being a soap manufacturing, but it was in an old soap factory. And so people still called it Savonnerie because it was the old soap factory. But there was a weaving manufactory in there, and that's this came from that place. So it's just like kind of like another, Gobelin could only make stuff so fast, and so they had to have others. More. So this is a wool carpet. Mm-hmm. Embroidered hanging from this workshop of Charles Lebrun. Okay. So here you have Louis XIV, symbol of Apollo or the Sun King. So here is a console. So the console table, these tables were made often with only two legs projected away from the wall. And then at the back edge, it would have been attached to the wall. So it really is almost like an extension of the wall surface. And then above it, normally they would have a mirror, and then you would set objects on the console, and the mirror, they would be reflected in the mirror. So it was really almost like this little like decorative setup. Okay. Armchair. So fauteuil is a term for an armchair from this, which is really like where we start to get these armchairs that are made, where like the fauteuil has like, it's like open underneath the arms. And so there was a chair associated with the Louis XIV, the reign of Louis XIV. So you can see there's a lot of like turned legs and a lot of carving on like this, like the stretcher is what goes between the legs. In this case, there's only like on the sides, and then there's a trestle piece underneath the bottom. This is a pliant. This is a folding stool. This is the kind of stool that would have been used at the court of Louis XIV. And this is the type of stool that if you were ever permitted to sit in the presence, if you were called before the monarch to sit and have a personal conversation in front of everybody, this is what you would sit on. You may never be granted permission to sit before the monarch, and if you were ever granted permission, it might only happen once. He was a special guy. So here at Tabaret, these other very like little, like they're not folding, but they have this like nice elaborate curving stretcher, and like the stretcher and trestle. Okay, this is a really like a chaise lounge, which is like an early something to like kind of like a little day bed. Really, it's like an armchair extended. Or like it's not an armchair. It's like a chair extended really long, so it becomes effectively a couch. So here's a kind of an odd-looking perspective. It's not really a very good perspective, but whatever. It's early, even though we had already had the Renaissance and perspective almost 200 years before this was drawn. It's diagrammatic, a diagrammatical drawing. You can see here the scroll is the leg. The scroll is the leg, the scroll is the leg, the scroll is the leg. And here you have this almost like it's an acanthus leaf and scroll all at the same time to create the arm. And the canapé is another term for sofa. Chimneys were very important for heat, for one thing. It was also another opportunity to create this architectural object. So it was a surface, it was another surface to carve. And again, it's still similar to the Italian Baroque. It's got classical elements, but there's a lot of invention. So the application of Greek and Roman ornament is not strictly Greek and Roman. It is French of the 17th century. There is a print of a diagram for a design of a chimney piece. So the print is something that would have been made that would allow someone to look at a picture of what it's supposed to look like. And the print can be reproduced, and so you can have multiple copies of the same book all over the place. And so you can have some consistency in terms of style. And they did look to other places. The Italians, the French, especially in the early French Baroque, they were dependent upon the Italians for how to do it and what it should look like. And then as the French got going, the French became standard, and they surpassed the Italians mainly because Louis XIV just dumped a boatload of money into it. Here is a fashionable Parisian parlor. So this is a print, probably an engraving from the 17th century of a Parisian parlor. So, it's nice to see that before there was photography, some people went to the trouble to create interiors, like just images that depicted what things looked like. And so this, it's artwork, so it's sort of built out of wall coverings, either like woven tapestry, or the wallpaper is starting to get introduced here. Mirrors, large windows, chimney. This is another. Oops. Is it there? Yeah. So another one from the Baroque era. So it's a painting that shows a French interior. But you can see there, like this is like meant to show like the tapestry peeling away from the wall. This is kind of like an artistic, maybe artistic comment to show us that this is artificial. So these verdure tapestries that are meant to give you this facsimile of nature in an interior, but it is all it's all artificial. So, and you can see the high back chairs. The painting is really more of like a I guess it's a little bit more of a narrative than I'm really interested in at this point. I'm more interested in seeing what this Baroque era bedchamber looked like. Chocolate was exotic, and to serve chocolate, silver chocolate pot. So beautiful object. There is the top showing the moussoir, or the stirring stick that goes into it. Images of some of the workshop. On the left, you see these like very large woodworking tables, and the minutiae were the furniture builders. They built chairs. Ébénistes were the guys who built cabinets. So you can see these like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 big woodworking tables, and a lot of guys hard at it, churning out the furniture. And you can see also, no, actually here, you can see these are like large doors and, yeah, they're making pieces. Like, this is like furniture pieces. So you can see up at the top here, the Boutique d'une Menuisier, and that's furniture. Okay. Now this is also in Paris. Louis XIV took the court to Versailles, but there were still some of the wealthy elite living in Paris, and so they made their, they basically were doing little like mini Versailles in these residences in Paris. And you can see some of this. There's some like modern fixture of electrical light that's been added. That's not from the Baroque era, of course. Large mirrors to make the space look bigger and brighten it up. Big panel doors, painting. So, the surfaces, most of the surfaces are treated or covered with either image or decorative ornament. Let's see. Talked about Boulle. Okay. So there are a few other points I want to make about the Baroque. Trade starts to influence interiors and furniture. As we get into the like this from this period onward, the Europeans are they're really all over the world looking for resources, moving into new territory, and unfortunately oppressing a lot of people in the process. So one thing that there's a term that you'll see some furniture that starts to get made shows influences from Asia. For the most part, the influence from Asia is really kind of vague. The Chinese, the Italians had long established contact with China. You start to get some influence from places like India, where anything from those places brought back to Europe is considered to be exotic. And sometimes they would just kind of like put stuff, take like a Japanese cabinet and cut it up and make it look like a European cabinet, but they would use this material that was from Asia. Sometimes they would paint furniture to look like it was lacquered, which is like a very time-consuming process. which produces a very glossy surface. There's a term when you see things that look kind of Asian. There's a French term called chinoiserie, and chinois, chinoiserie, chinoiserie, and it really means like the Chinese, which in those days they really didn't make a whole lot of distinction between different different Asian nations or groups, and so sometimes you'll see like ornament on a cabinet that is meant to be Chinese, but it has elements of Japanese, Indian, Chinese, Turkish sometimes. And as far as Europeans were concerned, it was like it's from over there, right? Oriental from the European perspective means east. Occidental means west. And so from their standpoint, from their point of view, all the stuff from Asia was just Eastern. And it was exotic. They didn't really make a whole lot of distinction between, Chinese and Japanese and Indian. It was all just exotic and interesting stuff. Now, some of the, like for something like lacquering or other processes, like in the creation of something like porcelain, they would bring craftsmen from China, for example, to come to Europe and work and create that stuff in Europe, because the Europeans couldn't quite figure out, like, they didn't know how to do it. They would see it, they couldn't communicate very well. They would make their own imitations, but it really wasn't the same. And so you start to get Asian influence on Europe, and they also start to have, like they literally bring people from China or from India to come to Europe and work so that they can have the stuff. Some of the other, like the technique of caning, which is like when the seat is kind of like, you see like seat furniture, the seat of a chair woven. That's an Indian technique of caning. And different types of exotic woods like ebony come from Africa. Some of the types of ebony come from different other places, but some of this exotic woods and processes start to get into European style of like the European furniture, and that really has a lot to do with trade, but also conquest, the European conquest. Okay. Now, one thing about mirrors are large and expensive, and so the mirrors, not only do they create better illumination and increase the apparent scale of a space, they're also a sign of wealth, because you had to have money to install these mirrors. So I'm just going through my notes to make sure I've got this stuff. And in this period of time, the sofa, which is not a couch, it's a sofa. So a sofa is a couch with a back. And if it doesn't have the back, it's a couch. If it's got the back, it's a sofa. And okay, good. That is so. You still have, like I showed you the video on marquetry last week. Marquetry is employed in the Baroque period. not to, as far as I am concerned, not really distinguishable from intarsia, although the Italians call it intarsia, the French call it marquetry. Okay, good. So we're ready to go on to the Rococo, and I am going to take a very short